Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Carosity Carecast. I am your host, Jeremy Watkins. In today's episode, I just want to talk about education for caregivers and why it is important. So stay tuned and we'll get at it. Welcome to the Carosity Carecast. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that this podcast is a good resource for you to educate you more, to light a fire in your brains and get you more passionate about the field. If you're a caregiver, whether you're a professional caregiver or a family caregiver, this podcast is for you. So today I want to talk about education for caregivers, what it means, why it's important, and what are some things that you need to be educated in as far as caregiving. So education for caregivers is specific education to your field of caregiving. And it's important that you understand what we call scope of practice. So you don't want to be a caregiver, whether you're a CNA or unlicensed home aide or a family caregiver. You don't want to educate yourself outside of your scope of practice. Mainly because, let me back up. I don't want to say that learning more is not important, but you want to make sure that you're specifically educating yourself in your field of non-medical caregiving. So you don't want to be a caregiver and studying surgeries. You don't want to be a caregiver and, studying or getting yourself educated about, physical therapy. Although those things are important, you want to hone in on your scope of practice of non-medical caregiving. It's very important. And once you hone your skills, the skills that you need for your scope of practice, it's okay to dabble in some education outside of your scope of practice, but you want to make sure that you're learning what you need to be doing and how you can learn more. Education for caregivers is extremely important because the more you know, and the more knowledge you gain about your scope of practice is going to help you help others. And that's the whole point of caregiving, is helping others. Whether it's the elderly or disabled, your scope of practice is helping others, and you want to have as much knowledge as possible so that you can better help and assist others. You want to be knowledgeable about the process of aging, if you are working with the elderly, because if you don't understand the process of aging, how are you going to understand the person you're supposed to be caring for? And I would go as far as saying you're not truly taking care of someone if you don't understand the process of aging. Because if you don't understand what's happening and taking place biologically, you won't know signs and symptoms to look for. You won't know what's going on. And if you don't know these things, you can't assist, and be helpful to the person you're supposed to be caring for. And the same goes for those with disabilities, whether you're young or old. If you don't understand the process and what's going on with specific disabilities and diseases, if you don't understand it, you cannot care for these people. It is impossible. Of course, you can do basics, but if you're just doing the basics, if let's say you have an elderly person, and part of the aging process may be losing the ability to swallow correctly, and you don't notice the signs and symptoms of aspiration, or you don't even know what aspiration is, that is a danger to the person you're caring for. If you are not educated, you are putting the people you are supposed to be caring for in danger, to put it bluntly. This is why education for caregivers within your scope of practice is extremely important. So I went over just a couple things that you should be educating yourself on, and that's the process of aging, the process of disabilities and diseases. You need to understand what's going on. So if you're going to be caring for someone with Alzheimer's, dementia, you need to educate yourself on that. And I encourage all caregivers, whether family caregivers or professional caregivers, educate yourself even before you have to care for a person with Alzheimer's or dementia. It's a different level, different levels of care, different levels of safety supervision. And if you're not educated, you are putting in danger the person you're supposed to be caring for. I'm going to probably repeat that statement over and over again so it sinks in and you understand how important your education is as a caregiver. Other things that you need to be knowledgeable about is basic skills of meal preparation, housekeeping, patient care. You have to understand and educate yourself on the basics of patient care. How to assist someone in transferring, or how to transfer someone safely, how to roll someone in bed safely, how to change a bed with someone in it. I thought that was, when I started off as a CNA, I thought that was probably going to be no, it's not a simple task. Changing the bed with someone in it, you have to be very mindful of the person's safety that's in the bed while changing a sheet. Now, in facilities, it requires 2 people for safety. Everything you do for someone revolves around safety. And if you're not educated, you're not being safe. So get knowledgeable, educate yourself about the processes of aging and disease and disabilities and basic skills, basic caregiving skills. Develop empathy. A caregiver without empathy is not a caregiver. If you cannot empathize, meaning putting yourself in someone else's position, if you cannot empathize with your patient or your family member, you're not going to want to educate yourself. Because the whole reason of educating yourself is because you empathize with these people you're caring for. And if you don't have empathy, what drive do you have to help someone? Not only do you want to develop empathy, but you want to develop good communication. Good communication is vital in caregiving. If you don't have good communication, or I would say, part of communication is documentation. I am a stickler for documentation. I tell the caregivers that work for my company, documentation to the T. You cannot over document anything. So I have some caregivers that will write what it seems like an entire novel for one shift, explaining everything from start to finish, and that is okay. I go through and I read every single journal entry. I read and look at all the documentation, make sure medications were given on time, the right medications were given or assisted with, that appointments were complete, that transportation went smoothly, that errands were being run, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Communication is key, and documentation is communication. Your mind can only hold so much information. So you're going to want to either write it down or, put it in an app. We use an app for our documentation called Verify Care, and it's a lifesaver. It helps me have oversight of all my clients and oversight of the caregivers. It helps me spot issues where education might be helpful. Because if caregivers aren't documenting or communicating the right things, then I need to spend some time with that caregiver and educate them better, or help educate them better on communication or maybe some skills. It's very vital, especially even a family caregiver. You might think that, day to day, same routine, but you don't understand, or you may not even see a specific decline if you're not documenting it, if you're not communicating it. If you're not communicating it by writing it down, that's a communication for yourself. It's also communication for professional care providers like doctors and nurses, physical therapists. Documentation is more than just a blurb saying you did your job. It's important communication. So we've gone over a lot, and I don't feel like there's enough time in the world to sit down on one podcast episode and explain all the facets of caregiving, because there is a lot. There is so much. And as you may have heard in the previous episode with Cicely Baker, she went over so many things, and we could have talked for hours on the importance of caregiver education. So if I were you, I would go back and have a listen to that episode, Perspectives and Experiences in Caregiving with Cicely Baker. It is a very good episode. I'm glad to have met her and network with her. I look forward to doing more episodes with her, as I believe she will be a tremendous resource for every caregiver that listens to this podcast. So just remember how important education is. And if you don't have the skill set you think you need, if there are questions you have, please ask. Ask other caregivers, maybe even ask nurses that you may know. Or you can use the web and Google caregiver education. Cicely Baker gave some resources in the last episode. She talked about an education system called Allison that you can look up online. It's a whole education system, not just for caregivers. You can pretty much be educated on anything with Allison, but if you specifically search for caregiving, it will give you an entire course completely free for caregiving. And there are so many other resources out there. But just educate yourself. It is vital. And the need for private in-home caregivers is growing. And as that need grows, we need more educated caregivers in the home. It's very important. It's not just a job. It's not just something you do. It's who you are. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I truly hope that this is a good resource of information and education for you as a caregiver. Be well.